afternoon to everyone. My name is Kriti Shroff, and I'm a leading career counselor, and I co-founded the organization Careers with Kriti back in 2015. Today, here we are with our special webinar called Career Discovery, where we will be inviting 10 different industry professionals, and each of our following videos will be talking about one industry and one career with a leading professional from that space. So we bring to you more knowledge and more content with the help of industry. On to our next segment for today, which is into careers in psychology. And I'm so glad and humbled to invite Ms. Tripti Chaudhary Vaid, who's here with us as psychologist and going to throw light about careers in psychology. A very warm welcome to you, Tripti. Thanks for joining in today.
Thank you so much, Kriti. I hope everyone's not exhausted and they don't need like a 5-minute break in between the sessions. I hope that's okay.
I think we've been doing this since yesterday, and students are joining in and joining off. So they're choosing to hear the careers they want to.
Oh, that's
so
lovely.
I think this generation is far, I think, more astute than we were when we were growing up.
And more sorted,
they have their own preferences, and I see a lot of names are changing continuously at the end and after the session. So students are joining in as per what they want to hear. So for all the audience, Tripti is a child and adolescent and young adult psychologist specializing in emotional disorders of children, adolescents, and young adults. She has been practicing for the last 12 years in Delhi NCR through her clients, though her clients are based all over the world. She is largely a private practitioner and is a senior consultant at the Center of Child and Adolescent Wellbeing. She has extensive experience in trauma-based psychotherapy, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, which is EDMR. Her expertise lies in working with young people with depression, anxiety, behavioral issues, eating disorders, obesity, post-trauma stress disorder, PTSD, fears, phobias, or other psychiatric disorders and psychological concerns. And she's held a lot of workshops and lectures and talks on different aspects of raising children in today's day and age. She's also an international affiliate member with American Psychological Association, and she loves teaching psychology and training young aspirants in the field of child and adolescent psychology. She runs her own internship program for master's level students, and her vision is to empower young people and their families and help them to become more adaptable in the society. Thank you, Tripti, for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Kriti. And a big hi to everybody out there.
So, Tripti, students here who are joining here will be mostly who are thinking of making a career in psychology. And we've seen that we've taken physical well-being very seriously in this country for the last so many years, but we've not paid the due attention to mental well-being for very long. However, it is very heartening and motivating to see that now the trends are rising and the acceptance is rising. It is also one of those careers which is very close to my heart and is usually received by a bag of mixed reactions when we tell students and parents to take up a career in psychology. So how would you like to describe the career in psychology and what kind of work do you think is involved in this field?
So again, to begin with, psychology is also a very, very big field, Kriti, right? You can decide whether you want to be a clinical psychologist, whether you want to, deal with people who have disorders like I do. Okay, I deal upfront with people who may have a diagnosed mental health condition. One could go into human resource work, one could go into occupational psychology, one could go into forensic psychology, which deals a lot with the criminal side of our human mind. So there's social psychology, there's developmental psychology, there's educational psychology, there's adult psychology, there's a lot of even within the umbrella term of a psychology as a career, depending on what one really feels for, and I'm going to come to that point, feels for, and why that's important in this field, right? You can decide what you want to do. So the work really depends on the kind of uh, specialty or subspecialty, I would like to call it, that you really choose, right? So on that basis the work would change. For instance, if you're working in an organization, the kind of concerns that you would get would be very different from if you worked in a clinical setup. If you worked as a sports psychologist, that would be really different, because there the there it would be very different. The people would be interacting with sports personalities, and the kind of stuff they would be working on would differ. If, on the contrary, you worked with a school psychologist, they would work on a different aspect. So the work per se kind of changes on the basis of uh, what you really choose to work with. Because remember, we're all humans, and there are different, kinds of minds that we may deal with. So the options are everything. It's not limited at all.
Absolutely. And I think you very rightly mentioned that with it, because there are so many different fields to specialize in and work with today. So uh, the work style will largely differ. However, in my experience, when I've been consulting students and parents to get into a career in psychology, I've usually been received with a very common response saying that I don't want my child to get into psychology because when they'll be hearing so many problems from people coming in, they might feel themselves surrounded by negativity. They might feel further bored down or negative. So, how do you think you want to address to this particular reaction, or what do you have to say for the same? Because I understand I am also consulting, and you've been a practitioner yourself. We don't see actual practitioners get bogged down by negativity, but with your help, I want to disseminate this knowledge to students and parents.
But Kriti, we do. I'll be very honest with you. This comes straight from my heart. That there are times you'll be bogged down. But isn't that a possibility with every career that we talk about? A career in psychology requires one thing very important, and that is working on yourself. Okay. Now, with other careers, also stress hota hai when your boss is on a timeline and you're not being able to fulfill something in a corporate setup, you'll feel stressed. Okay, when you need to present something and you're not being able to do it, you feel stressed. Those we taken as like that only. But when we talk about psychology, we talk about so much negativity coming our way. But remember, in your training, in our training, we are taught to manage that negativity. That is one of the essential requirements of being a therapist, that you're able to divest yourself out of it, you're able to take yourself out of it, you're able to go to a therapist yourself, which is a mandatory scenario, that you visit a therapist yourself to be able to kind of work through that your own negativity. And remember that journey is in itself what makes you a good professional. So it's not that negativity doesn't affect. Negativity does affect, but then we are also taught self-care practices to be able to manage that. When you are working in this field, it is very important to manage your own self, your feelings, your emotions. That needs to be centered, very, very rightly so.
Absolutely. I think very well put that we need to work a lot on understanding how we have to be strong and have to keep our emotions, and how to not let ourselves affect, or if we are getting affected, take due measures
Yes,
to
absolutely.
resolve that.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. So Tripti, that brings me to the next question, that what are the kind of skills that you think students should work on, both in terms of um, vocational skills or academic skills, and both, and in even the soft skills that they should be working on when they want to get into a career in psychology.
Okay, so one of the things that I mentioned before, and I said I'm going to come back to it, is feeling. So, psychology, to be able to do psychology, one of the most important needs is that you feel for that field very, very deeply. Could be translated as you have a passion for it or a deep interest for it, because it is a tough field, especially if you get into things like clinical and the severe spectrum. It is a demanding profession. It's not very easy. but it's also very, very rewarding. So I'd like to put that at the outset. Now, when we talk about skills, empathy, the ability to be able to put oneself in another person's place and not just sympathize with them, but actually empathize with them, that's one of the main requirements. A good listening ear, because there'll be times when, there'll be sessions where you won't be talking really, you'll just be the one listening. So a good listening ear is very, very important, right? Then also with listening, I always say that an open mind is very important. Remember, when you're working with people, they come with their own sets of they come with their own sets of ideas, they come with their own sets of uh, you know uh, cultural upbringing and all of that. So you need to keep all of that in mind and keep an open mind to working, right? You can't say that you don't connect with that's something that you need to work on your own self then. So listening skills, empathy, open-mindedness, some of the very, very important things to be able to work on, and a lot of patience. Sometimes the sessions are fast moving, patients will gallop and get better, sometimes they won't. And then you as a practitioner need to keep patience, you need to work it through, you need to read. Another important thing, one needs to learn to read in this field to be able to constantly understand how to move forward with a case, right? So reading, researching, studying, very important, right? Those are some of the skills, some of the things that one needs to be adept with when one is trying to work with this field. And obviously some amount of organizational skills, because if you're trying to be a private practitioner, you need to kind of organize your own appointments and all of that. Then you need to have some kind of a bent for that as well. Because sometimes when we think of we have a clinical profession and this is not something that I can be good at. It's not true, because if you're unable to manage your appointments well, if you're unable to kind of like deal with paperwork, writing, all of that, if you're not good at all that, you need to be good at all of that. So as a professional, you need to look at the organizational part of it, the admin part of it, as well as come to the core clinical skills as well.
Absolutely, brilliantly said, Tripti. And there are, I think, all the skills that you mentioned are very important, because when the students will get onto this journey, they will realize that how each of them will contribute in their own way in making them a successful practitioner. My next question is that, considering that we are here speaking to students who are in school right now, you
Right.
know, so by the time they will get on to embarking this journey as a professional, be irrespective they want to work as an independent practitioner or they want to work in the corporate or with some organization, it's at least 4 to 6 years of time horizon that we're looking.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are the kind of industry trends that you see in terms of opportunities, in terms of different kind of roles that they can embark on, different industries or options that they can have for recruitment? Because that's again one question that is very popularly asked by parents. That
Mm-hmm.
what are the possibilities of hiring? Where can my child do a job if the child becomes a psychologist? What are the various options? We always have an understanding that a person can be an individual practitioner, but
Yes.
besides that, what are the other options that you see a student in psychology can
There are lots of hospitals. So I'm going to answer first part. What are the trends? Now, looking at how the world is that we live in right now, Kriti, the possibility and the need, forget the possibility, I think the need for psychologists is mammoth. So all these kids who are listening to me, please become psychologists. It's a sincere request, because we
have? I agree in making that behest on your behalf.
please do, please communicate, send out emails, because the last 2 years have been so difficult on every individual in the world, that I think the need for psychologists and a need for a place to just be able to talk would be very important. And it is becoming important. I see it, Kriti. Over the last 2 years, the way the work has gone, the way how open parents have become to getting their kids now to a psychologist, and they don't want to take chances. They don't want to sort of say ki ye to phase hai, khatam ho jayega, and all of that. All of that, when it's not like that anymore. It used to be 10 years ago when I started practicing. It was very tough. But now I see that parents, children, adolescents, young adults themselves want to come to a mental health professional to be able to address their concerns, and they're ready to go to different kinds of professionals, not just a clinical person, but just anyone who can help them out. So if you were to ask me of how the trends are looking like for the next few years, at least the next 10 years, I think you know, there's a boom, because we need psychologists to be able to take care of so many people with mental health concerns. We need a lot more psychologists. We need a lot more, manpower to be able to kind of like, cope with that. Right. So that's part number one. And part number two, you asked me what are the options. Again, when you look at clinical, and I can speak for clinical because I'm from the clinical field, is that there are hospitals, there are centers mushrooming every day where people are requiring psychologists. There are individual practitioners. For now, I think in the Indian context, these are the three avenues, and there are obviously schools, and there are offices. Even I believe, what I hear from my friends who are in the corporate world, every organization has now actively started hiring trained psychologists. Pehle they used to be psychologists, but now they are trained on their board to be able to take care of people from the CEO level, whatever VP level 2, all the way to the down, to be able to take care of people with mental health concerns, or any kind of concerns for that matter. So I think in every field, in every area, psychologists are wanted. So I think the field is looking up. The field is definitely not what it used to be 10 years ago. 10 years ago, we used to still wait in the clinic and be like, patients aayenge, nahi aayenge, will we have clients, not have. Now that's not the case. You get your act together, you study hard, you get your facts right, and you'll have a steady flow of clients, and I can assure you that.
Absolutely, I totally agree. And I also agree with you on the organization part, where actually a lot of my friends who are in the corporate, they started telling me that how HR departments are working very actively to get trained professionals on board.
Yeah.
And these psychologists are primarily looking at the mental health, because there's a lot of stress in the corporate. So the long hours, family relations tend
Yes.
to take a turn, and they're not able to spend time with family, children, and
Yes.
hence psychologists are helping them cope up with these issues on ground. So definitely, in terms of the opportunities, there are umpteen number of opportunities to work with corporates, to work with hospitals and medical health institutions, to work with schools, to become an individual practitioner, and to work with government. I mean,
Yes.
last 6 months or so, I'm seeing there's so much of awareness that government is putting in now.
Yes.
uh, I see Delhi government has started a helpline. I see an ad coming in on
Yes.
TV where they say that you could just call up and discuss about your mental health. So many new avenues are opening up for students who are wanting to embark on this journey. And I totally agree with you that we need a huge bandwidth of people to get onto this journey, because we've unfortunately not put in a lot of thrust and focus in this area in the last so many years.
Yes, that's true.
My next question to you, Tripti, is how does a typical day look like for a psychologist? And how does your work affect your general lifestyle?
Okay, so typical day would mean, so I can say, like, now since I'm a mom, it's become lesser work. But because they're young kids, I'm going to give them the lowdown on what it used to be. So typically, one would see, and this is obviously just talking from the clinical perspective, huh? I wouldn't be able to comment on others. But usually, I would see about 5 to 6 clients in a day, take sufficient breaks in the middle, to be able to kind of like, center myself between sessions, because sometimes they can be overwhelming, sometimes they're not, but sometimes they can be. So I always like to keep a little bit of a breather in between the sessions, so that, I'm able to sort of, calm down, compose myself, and, sort of write down my last minute notes, and, step into the next session. So ideally, you're not like supposed to take more than 4 in a day, but in India we take a lot more. There were days when I was also taking 8 clients in a day, but that was a lot. So anything between 4 to 6 sessions a day, which is about, and typically my sessions would be about 50 to 55 minutes, and keeping paperwork in mind and keeping all of that in mind. That's how a day would typically look. Um, Again, most psychologists would give a lot of emphasis to taking those regular breaks in the day to be able to sort of center themselves. And why I'm stressing on that is because it is very important, right? And that's how the day looks. You finish your paperwork and you get back home, and then you read up on the cases that you're stuck, and you spend some time researching. And I think that's how a typical day for a psychologist looks. We also have a lot of let's say we do a lot of when there are workshops to plan, and there are, so all that happens in, the rest of the time that, you're not actively seeing a client. You do all of this other work, that, you would prepare workshop material, you know lecture material. All of that would happen in the time that you're not actively seeing clients. But this is how a day typically looks.
Superb. My next question to you, Tripti, is that what kind of education foundations do you recommend for students? What kind of education path they should be looking up after class 12th?
So I think what is required is a BA honors in psychology, and then followed by a master's. I always recommend that the more you get studying, the more clarity you have in concepts. Now, I don't I would recommend like a place where, while you're doing your masters, you could also do a small internship to kind of like, get the feel of what you're studying, to be able to, sort of practice that out in the real world scenario. That would be the best. And also I recommend that in your masters you should try and explore the different aspects of psychology that exist through small internships. So you actually try and understand what is it that you really want to do, what is it that you really want to focus on after your masters. So, pick up an internship with like with a company, with a human resource management place. Pick up something with like a clinic, do a hospital internship, do different kinds of internships, so that you get a whiff of, what is it that you would really want to work with. That's something that I would definitely recommend. And yes, I do recommend getting into clinical only after a master's. It just helps you. I think the education is just more refined and more finessed. I would think it's more also a little more concentrated. But what it also does to you as a person is that it gives you more time to kind of like, sort of simmer into the psychology concepts and psychology in general, to be able to prepare you to be able to see clients, or to, face the real world. Because a lot of what is taught in books is not really how it appears. But then anyway, the more you read, the more you stay with the concepts, the more, I think, the more prepared you are to handle clients. So my recommendation would be a definite BA honors, and followed by a master's is imperative.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you, Tripti, here that following a graduation in psychology, so a typical BA honors in psychology, and today there are a lot of liberal courses are also available with a major in
Absolutely.
psychology and a minors in some space. So
Yes.
probably that, but definitely a lot of concentration in whatever you're doing in psychology in your undergraduate level, and followed by a master's in
Yes.
the same field is something that is recommended. And internships, again, that's something that we've been hearing since yesterday, and a lot of professionals are saying, and you are again saying, is something which will bring in a lot of perspective.
It does.
Because I feel that that's one thing that gives you more of on-job, hands-on visibility on what you're doing. It tests you and your capacity on your skills, and makes you more aware of what you want to do and what is required to be there.
Absolutely. Kriti, if there's 2 minutes, I'd like to share how I kind of like, deduced to coming to this whole long list of disorders that you read in my bio. That how did I come to that? was when I was doing my internship, I was exposed to all. I knew one thing very clearly, that I wanted to work with children, but whether I wanted to work with developmental concerns, which is more to do with autism, learning difficulty, all of that, or whether it was, clinical disorders as depression, anxiety, and all of that, they're all different fields. One is behavioral disorders, one is developmental disorders, one is emotional disorders. Now, from the very start, during my internship days, I realized that I'm not a developmental person at all. I couldn't work with that age group. I couldn't do it. But the moment there was a case which was an adolescent, or let's say upwards of 8-year-old, and with an emotional concern like a phobia or a depressive case, or with anxious concern, that interested me. That's what I felt for. Remember, in the starting of my conversation, I said I'm going to come back to the feeling part. I felt very strongly that I wanted to do this. So I think my internship, though it was in the field of child psychology, which is anyways a subspecialty, usme bhi I kind of like, when I did my internship, I realized what my abilities were towards and what it wasn't towards. So I understood that, trauma, severe psychiatric is what I really choose to work with. And that's how I kind of like, drifted into this. And I still don't work with developmental concerns at all. If they come to me, I'm like, I'll refer it out. I'm not going to work with this because I don't feel I'm good at it.
Absolutely. I think that's very valid point that you've said. And again, we've heard this kind of an emotion from a lot of other professionals as well that we were speaking to for the last 2 days, is you need to feel for what you're doing. Because if
Yes.
you're connected to what you're doing, you'll automatically do it well. So again and again, I always tell students that वो आमिर खान ने जो थ्री इडियट्स में बोला था वो बिल्कुल सही था. That if you know, if you're good at what you're doing, and if you're passionate about what you're doing, you will do well. You will excel in that.
Success chak maar ke piche, I guess. And that's what he said.
Yeah, yeah, something like that.
Something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
But that is
But
true. Interest,
absolutely.
passion, you feel for the field. That is very important. At least, I mean, I'm sure it's important for every field, Kriti, very, very
I'm
important.
sure. I'm sure.
But
I'm in this
psychology
career.
cannot function without it.
Yeah, I'm in this career only because I'm passionate about it.
Absolutely.
So, and that's why I feel my work is not my work, and I want to learn more. I want to excel. I want to give out more. So, and that can only happen when you love what you're doing.
Yes, absolutely.
Totally.
That's totally true.
I think this is a brilliant thought to end the session with this. And I'll now open the chat box for questions from the audience. And I can already see there are a couple of questions coming in as direct messages to me.
Okay.
So first question is, there is a myth. If I opt for psychology, I am limiting my options. Is that true?
I don't think you're limiting your options, honestly speaking, not anymore. Like now, why it's a myth, I would like to answer that, because earlier people did feel, if they studied psychology, then things would get limited. But now the reach of psychology has become bigger. Earlier, it was only looked upon as a doctor who was sitting in a mental health clinic and doing work on very severe clients. That is the perspective that we've all grown up with. Let's be very honest about it, right? But that's not how it is anymore. Now people work on personality developments, they work on improvement, they work on calming people. There's a lot of work that psychology has also sort of fell out its branches into. So it's not so limited anymore. It's really not.
Absolutely. And I totally agree with you, Tripti. The myth is definitely there because when you and I were growing up, we did not see a lot of options in the industry. And hence, the generation which is above us was kind of always telling us that psychology लेकर इतने options नहीं हैं आपके पास. लेकिन today the world has totally changed. Psychologists are getting hired in almost every spectrum of society. I recently had one of my students who was hired by a largest marketing research firm, and he was a psychologist because they wanted to understand consumer psyche. And imagine, I mean, you're not even limiting yourself to be a practitioner. You're even using your insights into something which is as mainstream as marketing.
Absolutely. So that's why the field is not limited anymore.
Absolutely.
It's the understanding of the human mind is required in every field
Every field.
whatsoever. So not anymore that it you rightly put the question, it's a myth. That's the operative word here. It is a myth that you don't have options, but it's not true anymore.
I'm glad. Now, the next question is, if a client comes to you and do not know about that case, how will you respond in that session to heal your client so that your client does not know about it? I'm not
Can
too
you can
I'm
you
not too sure what this child wants to ask. I'll just reiterate it.
yeah.
If a client comes to you and you don't know about that case, how will you respond in that session to heal your client so that your client does not know that you do not know about it? So I think the child is trying to say that you don't have a complete understanding of that kind of a situation or that kind of a scenario. I mean, I'm assuming that the child is wanting to do something.
Okay, I'm a bit confused, but I'll try and answer whoever's question this is. Okay, so here goes. In case you have a follow-up question, maybe you could email me or whatever. So if I do go into a session without any background, mostly when the people are coming for the first time, we go in without any background. Okay, so what we do is called like a history taking, which means you start asking with the very simple question, why are you here? And instead of feeling like you know something, it's better to not know and it's better to ask. In my field, that's the operative question, is you ask the person that what is their problem.
Yeah.
They'll come up with what is the concern, and that's how you proceed forward. Now, I
Yeah.
don't understand the last part of your question. If they don't know that
So I
know,
think what the child is trying to say here, even I'm a little confused, but
that's all right.
yeah, but I think what the child is trying to say is that without letting them know that we are not an expert in that field or we do not have a knowledge of that field, how will we consult them? I think that's, please, whoever has asked this question, if you can just
Rephrase it for me, please,
rephrase
because
it, we
if
will, yeah,
someone was coming to my clinic, I think they would know. However, sometimes, to answer, sometimes a child is brought in without telling who they are going to. A lot of times parents will bring a child into my session without telling them what is going on. In that case, I choose honesty. I tell them what's going on.
it's very important. I agree.
Okay, because in my understanding, in my field, my client is the child, adolescent or young adult, whoever is coming to me, right? The parents are not my clients, the child is. So
I
my
believe that
100,
trust is very important.
absolutely, my trust, my rapport with the child becomes very, very important. So I would tell the family that let's discuss this openly and tell what's going on.
Absolutely. And I also feel that in our streams, because I'm also coming from a consulting field like yours, I feel it's very important to be honest about what our specialty areas are. Like in just a while ago, you mentioned that even if today some case comes to you which is into learning development issues, you clearly refer them to somebody else.
Yes.
Similarly, if a case comes to me where they need because all adolescents come to me, if they need some kind of psychiatric help or some kind of psychological help, they're into depression, I clearly voice it out and say that I'm not an expert in that space. You need to go out and reach out to the experts. So I think expectation management in this field is very important, and understanding where to say no and where to say that what are we good at and what is under the ambit of what we can do is very important.
That's very true. Na? When we look at the physical health, this whole conversation started with how much emphasis we've given to physical health. Will you go to a heart surgeon and say, "Ki nahi, mere kidney mein problem hai, please, meri kidney dekh lo"? No, you
Correct.
won't. You'll go to a kidney specialist. You will go to a person who's trained to do that. And especially so, therefore, the same logic applies to the mind as well. That when you have specialists available, please go to them. They will help you in that, with that concern in a much better way, right? So yeah,
Okay. Moving on to the next question is, which stream should we opt if we want to get into a career with psychology?
I think any stream. So I was as a commerce with maths 11th and 12th person, and I decided to go ahead with psychology. But I do understand that having psychology at 11th and 12th grade at that level sort of gives an edge to understanding things in a much better way. And that's sort of the challenge that I felt, that because I came from a commerce background, some of the concepts were not hard for me to understand, but they were just delayed for me to understand, because people who had done psychology in 11th and 12th, they already had a grasp of those theories or those concepts, which I had to learn later on. But again, I would think an arts field would be good. Kriti, would be better to answer that question, because I came from all different fields, so uh,
So yes, I agree with Tripti. You can be choosing science or commerce or humanities to get into psychology. Studying psychology can be in class 11th and 12th can be an advantage, but it is not imperative. So even if
yeah,
your school does not offer it or you're not able to take that as a subject, it's absolutely okay. You can still take up that BA honors in psychology. I personally feel coming from either humanities or from science background has gives you a slight edge
yes,
vis-a-vis coming from commerce, because when you're studying sciences you're also you're studying either mathematics or biology, which again both the subjects have their own advantages to studying psychology.
right,
And again, if you're studying humanities, you're studying philosophy and sociology. These subjects again go very close with
yes.
psychology and again improve your understanding. So these two streams are better equipped or will give you a slight advantage. Having said that, you could be coming in from any subject areas.
Yeah, I think that's very, like, that's absolutely on mind.
Great,
So,
thank you. The next question is, what would you suggest for people suffering from depression? What should they do to stop overthinking?
please ask me. Let's email. Or this one I'll
Yeah,
take on
yeah.
email, because
Email,
this
yes.
one would, I guess, need a little more
Take
background for
another,
me
yes.
to, answer. Not
I
not
understand.
for
This
it.
is not in the ambit of our discussion today. So
That's all right.
you
But please
could
do give this
email.
person this my email ID, and they could definitely reach out. And I understand your question is very valid, very important, but just that it could take a little longer for me to answer this. Yeah. So I'll probably answer that on an email or talk to you on a call or
Okay, so there is another student who's saying, "Can you help me? I'm bipolar." So for all of you who think you need some kind of advice from Tripti, we will share her email ID with you, and you can reach out to her and seek her professional advice. The next question is, um, have you ever been in a situation where people talked down about psychology as a career?
so many times. Such a like a nice question, because there were so many times that you would go and you say you're a psychologist and say, Acha, what am I thinking now, tell me that. And I'm like, I'm not a clairvoyant, and I'm not like a mind reader or something. They often a lot of people have that notion about it. And yeah, a lot of people talk down even today. That is something you'll just have to go, because it's an remember, psychology in general is in its infant stage. With other careers, they've reached adulthood, they've reached middle adulthood, old adulthood, all of that, even adolescent. But psychology is still in its infant stage. Infant means it's in its babyhood, right? So these kind of comments will come your way. इसमें क्या होता है, एक phase होता है, खत्म हो जाएगा, just there'll be lots of spiritual guidance you'll get, that people just get over it, or people will tell you, oh, it's just, whatever, just get over it, okay, it's like whatever. But it's not like that. And when you read psychology, when you understand the science, remember, it's a science, it's not just an art based situation, because there's enough research and evidence that has gone into making it a scientific field, right? So when you read up the science behind it, you'll be able to understand what is making the mind work the way it is. It's not clairvoyance, it's not a phase, it's something that's actually going on in the mind. So yes, there have been lots of times people have talked down to me, and I've just, sometimes I've got, I think how I might have handled something, I might have like fought back. But again, I think with little experience, you get to know ki kiske saath, you want to fight back and who you don't want to fight back with. Otherwise, you just smile and be like, "Ha, I'm sure that works," and you let that go. But yeah, you do get talked on
I
because
totally echo that thought, Tripti, that with age and with experience, I think you will learn how to handle it.
yeah,
Initially, even I used to start a complete war when somebody used to say something.
yeah,
Now I just smile, and in my head, I feel like, oh my God, you're so ignorant. So
I actually wish that one day you realize that, mental health is actually very, very important, So, yeah, well, I think one grows up, right? Pehle we are all activists ki nahi, सामने वाले को समझाना है that, this field exists and all of
Yeah.
that. But I think when you calm down in your profession, you realize the kind of stuff you see, you just automatically have a different way of answering it.
And I think so many lives you're touching and impacting in this career, which is so rewarding, that gives you so much of internal peace and happiness, Tripti.
That it does.
So that I think calms you down, because when
Yeah.
you see the actual effect, when people are actually helped and impacted,
Yeah.
you know,
When
I
they
think
heal,
they're
that's the biggest payoff of this field, is when you see people healing and people being able to cope with the situations that earlier were very difficult for them. They were completely enmeshed in it, and now you see them coping with it. Children going back to school who haven't gone to school in a while, who are on a school refusal. When you see them go back to school and make that attempt, that is the biggest payoff in this field.
absolutely, I totally
That is like the biggest high that you can get in this field.
agree. So thank you, Tripti. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me over, and all the best to all the kids. uh, please consider psychology as a profession for sure, and do share my email ID with all of them, Kriti, so that whoever needs any kind of guidance, please reach out.
Absolutely. Thank you so much once again. We cannot be more indebted to you for your
Thank
time
you.
today. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.